What's up, guys? I'm Jeff from Worldwide Cyclery, and something we've dealt with a lot since we've started this business is people sort of testing equipment and maybe overthinking equipment when they are testing it and reviewing it, and changing bikes and riding new bikes or riding new tires or new wheel sets and all of that sort of stuff. I recently had the chance to hang out with a good friend of mine, Neko Mulally, who is a professional World Cup downhill racer, and he's kind of a bike nerd, and he's been racing pro for a long time. He's been riding bikes his entire life. He's a phenomenal racer. But more importantly, he's got a really good mentality in terms of how he goes about testing his equipment. He's switched brands that he's been sponsored by about 5 times now. And so he's had to test new bikes and new equipment almost every year, every couple years. And he really thinks it through, and he really does a lot of sort of scientific and analytical testing. He's also had some pretty cool Instagram posts where he talks about the testing that he does on there and then writes this like 4-paragraph caption all about it. But nonetheless, I got a chance to sit down with him and talk to him about his thoughts on how he goes about testing his equipment, and what goes through his head and what he's found out over the years of doing all this stuff. So here it is. All right, Neko. Franken Bikes, you've tested a lot of things. You've been racing pro for how long?
10 years.
10 years. So you've switched brands. You were on Specialized, then Trek, then Scott, then YT, and now Intense. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Sweet. So how do you go about one brand to the next brand, downhill bikes, trail bikes, like adapting to your bike and testing your equipment?
Well, the biggest thing for me changing bikes has been to try to get fully up to speed on your current bike and know that thing inside and out before changing. And the more variables you can eliminate too, like sometimes even if I'm changing teams and a few things are changing, I'll try to only change one at a time. Like if I've got new tire sponsor and frame sponsor, I won't try to ride the new tires and frame the first time at the same time.
Pretty smart.
The fewer variables you have, the more you can feel each individual change and understand it and feel the difference. Yeah. So that's been something big, and just like when I switched to this bike this year, I got this bike at the end of 2018, and I rode a bunch of downhill in the middle of the winter because I wanted to be up to speed on my YT before I jumped on the Intense, so I could feel the difference. Yep. I didn't want to just come off the couch on a new bike and be like, well, yeah, it feels good. Yeah. I haven't ridden in a while. It's a new bike. It's great. So I was comfortable. I knew what my bike did, how it performed, did what I wanted it to do, and then could feel the change when I jumped on this one. Yeah.
That's cool. And you've done a number of things where you've tested 29er downhill bikes sort of before they even existed. And then also when you've done 29-inch front, 27.5 rear. What did you learn?
Yeah, so I'd had a 29er way back in 2016 before kind of anybody else did, and a lot of my stuff's pretty homemade. And at that point, that was very homemade, that bike, like the shock and everything. Like you have to account for a little bit of like it not being designed from the ground up to work that way.
Yeah,
and
like this is. And
yeah, if you do it in your like a homemade garage mod, like it's got some bit of like jankiness that you have to account for. Like it's not going to feel like a bike that's designed to work like that.
Yeah,
totally. So that first 29er was good, but it was just a bit weird. Like I was running a 27.5 fork with 27.5 offset, and like it didn't have the right size shock and an angle set to get everything kind of back to normal, and it was all right. It was cool to test the theory then, but it didn't really work that well just because of that. And then this year I was able to, on the YT, test a 27.5 rear wheel versus a 29 rear wheel on the same bike with a 29er front wheel. Yeah. So I had a full 29er, and I took it down to run 27.5 in the rear or just 29 in the rear. And it was pretty quick to change, and there's not very many times that you can on the same bike change that quickly the rear wheel. So you're not having to deal with jumping on a completely different bike that has tons of variables, like I was saying. Yeah. So I could change the shock, take the rear wheel off, change the shock when the wheel was off, put the rear wheel back on, and in 4 minutes, I was up the shuttle and doing another run. So I could be on the same bike and just that minor change. And there's definitely some advantages to running the smaller rear wheel, jumps especially. Like it was so much easier to just get low and like scrub a jump and not get buzzed in the ass when you're on those jumps on the big rear wheel. Steep stuff, it had a little bit better clearance, not much. I noticed no difference with braking, cornering. I thought, a smaller rear wheel, less inertia would brake better. Cornering, the smaller rear wheel would be able to get through tighter turns better. But being on the same bike with the axles at the same place, it didn't make a difference. Yeah. I mean, to the point where I was riding with some buddies and hit a turn really sick and was like, damn, that 27.5 wheel turns fast. And then I looked back and it was the 29er on there. So, it was just, it put it in perspective, riding it back to back that close with no variables. It was like, especially coming from being comfortable on a 29er, if I was going the other way, going up in wheel size, maybe it would be better to run. And if I was smaller too, if I was a shorter guy and I needed the clearance, or a girl, I think it'd be really good for that to run a 27.5 rear wheel. But the biggest thing I noticed after doing a bunch of timed runs is there wasn't much difference at all. Like, it was like, for me, one thing I've learned with all this testing is what you think is better is the best option.
Yeah, like placebo effect is like a lot of reality when it comes
absolutely.
to stuff.
If you're stoked on it, if you're like, man, this thing's gonna rip, that's gonna be the best thing for you.
Yeah.
If you're riding it with complete confidence, that's better than riding something that's better and not being sure about it.
Yeah,
so
I totally agree.
I mean, I did the same thing. I tested some fork offset. I think that the crowns on the 40, like just the offset on the 49. With the lowers, they're pretty long offset. They run a 58 mil offset, which is, they try to do that to make sure that the rear wheel would clear the down tube at bottom out on all frames. And the offset just feels pretty long to me, like on some other 29er downhill forks, it's 56 and a bit shorter. And I had some custom crowns from a couple of years ago that the Fox guys gave me. Like, I remember it was like 2014. They were like, hey, we're going to throw these away. Do you want them? Yeah. Like, G. Atherton wanted these to test his bike. Like, it's a crazy idea. He wanted less offset. Like, they're drop crowns. Who would want drop crowns back then? And he's like, we're throwing these out. Do you want them? And I was there. I was like, yeah, sure. I'll try them out. Like, I was at the point where I was willing to just try anything to see what it was like. And I kept them. And now they're like 3 mil less offset. And they're, so they bring this offset of the 49 to like 55, which I like a little better, honestly. And like, I tested it a bunch and I was like, I do kind of prefer it, but I jump on it and I can feel the difference. But in about 5 turns, my body can adjust to, okay, this is how much input I need to give to the bike to get it to go where I want to.
Yeah.
So a good rider can adapt to that so quick, and a bad rider won't even notice the difference. So it's
it's the truth, man.
It's something that's like, you just like, the original offsets, like, they weren't even designed really to be like it was just a number that an engineer designed, really, like, and it's just the amount of input you give to the bike to get it to go where you want. So coming back to that, like, these special crowns I have, like, I thought about, like, do I want to race with them this year? Because they're pretty sick. Like, they definitely are in the direction I'd like to see it go, but I can ride them both. It just takes a bit of getting used to, and the hassle of like carrying these golden crowns around the globe to, like, I've got a European bike, an American bike, a bike at home, and to take this one set of crowns all around with me and like make my mechanic swap them. It's just like, it's so much hassle that even like racing at the top level, I'm not gonna do it. Like, I'm gonna race the same crowns as everybody else. And the offset, like, it's just gonna work. Like, I'm just gonna ride it and adapt to it. And I mean, like I said, you could ride it any offset and you'll be fine on it. You'll learn how to ride it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, bikes have come so far these days, and it is a technical product, right? And people definitely often get wrapped up into like this offset, that offset, these angles, this geo. And it's interesting because you can see all the different spectrums of it, from like novice riders that are just trying to like start to digest like what all this stuff means and how it plays out when they're actually riding their bike, to like people like you at the top of, in the World Cup racing circuit that have tested all this stuff, been riding bikes, super talented, been on them for like decades, and like hearing different people's inputs on it and stuff too. And like, you've always been, to me, like one of the more sensitive people to like different changes, right? At least in the last, I don't know, handful of years. Like when you were younger, you probably didn't care at all. Totally, yeah. You had a very different mentality. Like when we were kids racing, like you didn't give a shit, you know? And so you've changed a lot, but that's part of like, also like you've obviously sped up and got faster and had faster competitors, and like, so you've got more in tune with all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I feel like I've kind of come full circle. Like when I was 17, I didn't care.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was like really starting to understand, and I felt like I had too much information. Like I knew too much about it where I was like, oh no, like I want this change, I want that change. Like I can't ride this bike like this. And now I've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, I can like get the bike set up the way I want, get it to a window that I'm happy with the performance, and then after that, just forget it and ride it.
Yeah.
You always
Get
gotta
comfortable.
Yeah, you gotta get comfortable, and like for sure, there's a lot of beginners out there that I can quickly make some suspension adjustments, bar height, just help them with a few small things and get them feeling like a lot more comfortable. But after that, like stressing about all the changes, the tweaks, it's like, it doesn't make as big of a difference as you think.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I've done a lot of back-to-back testing. A lot of the companies that I ride for make us do competitor testing, and we'll go out and ride competitor product. And sometimes in your head, like you think that whatever product is like bad, like I would never like that. But then you ride them, like go up on one run, come down as quickly as they can change it. They change the part out, and then you go up on another one, and you're like, wow, that was very similar. You know, it wasn't a huge difference. So yeah, a lot of the things that people sometimes stress out on is just, I can hardly feel it. So an amateur rider would really struggle to feel the difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, as long as you get your bike to where you're comfortable, it's like within a good working window, then you got to just forget about it and start riding it at that point.
Yeah. So average rider, weekend warrior, what's sort of like top 3 main things that you think that they could probably change right now that would make them feel more comfortable on their bike?
Yeah, so I'd say for anybody who's like doing somewhat gravity oriented, whether it's aggressive trail, enduro, or downhill, like sag's super important. Figure out what sag's ideal on your bike. Like it's going to be different depending on what kind of bike you're riding. If it's a VPP or a single pivot or a 4-bar, whatever, there's going to be a different sag that's ideal.
Yep.
So figure out what sag's good for your weight and get your spring rate dialed front and rear.
Yeah.
And then every time you ride, make sure that's correct. Tire pressure the same. Like figure out what tire pressure you like. Like ideally as low as you can go without damaging your rims is normally what I go for. And for me that's kind of like higher than I'd like to be, but I don't want to. You can't just break the bike and not make it to the bottom.
Yeah, totally.
So figure out that and get that. Like every time you ride, make sure it's correct. So you got a baseline and you're solid there. And then the rebound is super important. Like compression, I feel is like preference, whether you like it to feel stiff or softer. But the rebound is like, that keeps like, when you hit a big jump or a drop, that stops your bike from bouncing or chattering. Like it keeps your bike glued to the ground. And getting that set up, it's hard to explain, but having some help if you can find it, or just making sure that it's balanced front to back, I think is really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff.
So let us know down in the comments what you guys think about all of this. How do you go about testing new equipment and new bikes, and sort of your mentality towards the whole thing? Make sure to share this video with all of your mountain bike buddies. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.